In the old Italian archives, on the bottom shelf of a cabinet rarely visited even by the staff, there was a worn folder labelled Train Number 97, June 1911. The cover was covered in dust, with a dried coffee stain in the corner, and the spine bore a barely legible case number. No one remembered the last time it had been opened, until in 1943, archivist Giulio Rizzi, searching for documents from the First World War, stumbled upon it by chance. The papers inside smelled of smoke and oil, as if they had been stored near the railway workshops. On the first page, the lines were neatly filled out. Rome, Milan, train number 97, departure date, June 14th, 1911. 1945, engineer, Giovanni Merli, assistant, Fabio Conti, conductor, Antonio Lombardi. Number of carriages, 3. Passengers, 23. After that, a blank space. The arrival section remained empty, and a blot of ink nearby looked as if someone holding the pen had suddenly changed their mind. June 14th was an ordinary summer day. The sun scorched Rome, carrying the scent of stone dust and hot metal. On platform 3, people bustled about. Some fanned themselves with newspapers, some smoked nervously. Women adjusted their hats. Engineer Merli stood by the locomotive, checking the gauges. He was known for his precision. None of his journeys had ever been late by more than a minute. His assistant Fabio, a 20-year-old boy, kept a notebook in his pocket, recording everything: the water temperature, pressure, even Merli's mood. The steam engine breathed with anticipation. Conductor Lombardi closed the doors, whistled, and the train, lurching heavily, began its journey north. Outside the windows, the suburbs, fields, and scattered trees flashed by. In one carriage sat the Falconi family, father, mother, and 2 children, traveling to Milan to visit relatives. In the neighboring compartment were 2 engineers returning from bridge construction, their suitcases stuffed with blueprints. In the last carriage sat an elderly widow, holding a box of photographs on her lap. None of them would appear in any official record again. At Orta station, around 9 in the evening, the train passed exactly on schedule. The dispatcher noted in the log, "Movement normal, passed without stopping." Beyond this point, the mountains rose, the rails climbing. Higher, the air growing cooler. The sun had completely disappeared behind the horizon, leaving only the black line of the San Gottardo tunnel ahead, nearly 15 kilometers under solid rock, one of the longest in Europe at the time. Signalman Marco Riva later told investigators, "When the locomotive approached the entrance, I noticed something strange. The air seemed to shiver, not from heat, but in some other way, like steam, but without warmth. I blinked and the train had already entered. Everything seemed normal, smoke, steam, the clang of metal. But there was a flash just before the entrance. Not lightning, silent, without light, just a reflection. 20 minutes later, at the opposite exit, no one saw anything. The signalman waited, listened. Silence. Half an hour later, they contacted the station by telephone. It didn't come out. How? Didn't come out. Initially, they assumed a stop inside. Workers with lanterns, then engineers, entered the tunnel. After the first 100 meters, they found the rails interrupted, not physically, but covered with dust, as if unused for decades. The wheel marks, the sleepers, everything vanished. The tunnel was inspected thoroughly. Stones, walls, ventilation shafts, no traces of anything. Only the smell of machinery oil and cold lingered. One engineer, Carlo De Santi, later said he heard an echo like a distant clatter of wheels, as if the train was nearby, yet the sound receded as if moving deeper into the rock. By morning, the authorities had blocked the section. A commission arrived from Rome. Newspapers were full of headlines: "Disaster in the tunnel. Train missing with passengers, but no evidence of an accident was found. Geologists stated that a collapse was impossible. The rock was stable, no vibrations recorded. Everything seemed as if the train simply did not exist. On the third day, workers with projectors entered the tunnel. They found only a few dropped nuts, but even these were too new. They belonged to the maintenance crew, not the missing train. A week later, rumors filled nearby villages. People said that on foggy nights they could hear a whistle, even though the tunnel was sealed. Some claimed to have seen glowing windows moving in the mist. One shepherd swore that in the morning he found a metal wheel rim on the slope, covered with frost, though it was summer. The rim vanished when police came to inspect it. The police grew weary of arguing with villagers. Officials demanded a report. At the end of June, the investigation concluded. Train number 97 is considered lost due to a catastrophe of unknown nature. Human losses, 26 persons. Material losses, 3 carriages and a locomotive. This wording satisfied the ministry. The papers were filed away in the archives. But the rumors persisted. In August, an engineer involved in the search went insane. He claimed to have seen a light moving inside the rock, and that the train found a way in another direction of time. He was committed to a psychiatric clinic near Florence and died 2 years later without regaining consciousness. It could have ended there, if not for a note made in 1943 by Giulio Rizzi. The archivist noticed on the last page of the folder a new line written in pencil. Train number 97 did not disappear. It went somewhere we are not used to looking. At first, Rizzi thought it a prank, but when he tried to identify the author, he discovered that the pencil note had appeared between 1939 and 1941, during the years the archive was locked and staff evacuated. Curiosity gnawed at him. Rizzi began comparing old railway records across Europe and soon found strange coincidences. In 1926, Argentina reported a train without a driver passing through a line dismantled in 1909. Witnesses described 3 carriages illuminated with soft golden light, no passengers visible. The locomotive moved silently. In 1934, Hungary's records mentioned a similar train gliding slowly across a closed station platform. In Japan's Nagoya port in 1938, a ship captain swore he saw illuminated carriages sliding over the water as if reflected, but with no source beneath, and the number on one carriage matched 97. The coincidences seemed impossible, yet the records were authentic. Rizzi compiled a report and sent it to the Ministry of Transport. He received no response. A year later, he vanished from Rome. Only a folder with newspaper clippings and a margin note remained. If it moves not in time, but in a circle, the end of the path is the beginning, and one day it will return to the tunnel, to go through it again. Since then, the legend of the train that never was became part of the oral history among railway workers. Elderly men would say that on particularly foggy nights, when the rails shiver in the wind, one can hear a faint clatter, as if the train runs underground where no tracks exist. One aged engineer living in Turin in the 1960s claimed, "I saw it. In 1911, I was 17. We were at the depot when suddenly a sound came from the distance. I thought it was a night freight train, but when I looked on the embankment, there was only a light in the fog, and nothing more. Then I heard 3 short whistles. That was their signal, 3 short ones. No one else gave it but Merli." He recounted that for 3 nights in a row, he dreamt of faces in the carriage windows, silent, with pale lips, staring outward, as if underwater. More than half a century passed. The papers in the archives yellowed completely. Case number 97 was almost forgotten. Yet occasionally, reports surfaced from Europe of a ghost train. In Poland, Czechoslovakia, Romania, everywhere the descriptions were similar. 3 carriages, an old locomotive, the number 97, a soft glow in the windows, and the sense that the train touched no ground. Thus ended the first chapter of the story, in which disappearance was not the end, but the beginning of a journey that transcended ordinary reality. Train number 97 continued its passage, unseen, unstoppable, and perhaps still moves somewhere, leaving behind only a tremor in the air and the smell of cold iron. Nearly a decade had passed since the disappearance of train number 97, yet memories of it had not faded. In small railway stations across Italy, Hungary, and Poland, old engineers would gather in the evenings after their shifts and quietly discuss this strange train. They called it the ghost train, although the words ghost and myth did not convey the full weight of the terror that lingered after encountering it. The first witness that could be considered official was a shepherd named Luigi Bellini from Tuscany. He claimed that on the night of October 22, 1911, he had seen a distant glow moving through the hills. At first, he thought it was a wagon carrying lanterns, but as it approached, he realized it was a train. 3 carriages, soft golden light. In the windows, no sound, no driver at the locomotive. It passed slowly, almost floating above the ground, and disappeared into the mist without leaving tracks. Word of this sighting spread quickly. Railway workers and villagers whispered about it, and soon reports of similar apparitions appeared across the country. In Venice, a night dispatcher wrote in his logbook about a train appearing on a disused track. In Florence, a factory worker saw a faint light moving across a closed station platform. All of these accounts shared a single detail: the number 97, visible somewhere on the locomotive or carriages. Carlo De Santi, the engineer who had initially surveyed the San Gottardo tunnel, compiled maps and detailed measurements of the route. He meticulously marked all intermediate stations, side tunnels, and ventilation shafts, calculating the train's speed and position at every moment. Yet his findings were baffling. According to the calculations, train number 97 should have emerged from the tunnel 17 minutes after entering, but there was no exit. Even more puzzling, the disappearance occurred around the 3rd kilometer, precisely where the rock became particularly dense and impenetrable. De Santi noted in his journal, "This is not an error. This is not a physical anomaly. It simply vanished into nothing." By the 1920s, public interest in the event had reignited. Rumors of ghost trains operating on abandoned tracks began to circulate widely. An archival document discovered in Naples described a train with number 97 supposedly passing through a station that had been closed for 10 years. The witness described it as 3 carriages illuminated with soft golden light, no passengers, visible. The locomotive moved silently. These rumors were impossible to verify. Many railway records from the First World War had been lost or destroyed. Nevertheless, the stories persisted among railway workers, growing more detailed with each retelling. One elderly man from Bologna, alive into the 1950s, claimed he had seen train number 97 himself. "I worked at the station on a foggy night. Suddenly a light appeared in the hills. I heard 3 short whistles, then silence. When I checked the map, there were no tracks there." These accounts matched the engineer's diaries. In particular, Giovanni Merli's assistant, Fabio Conti, had written in 1910, "If something goes wrong and the rails disappear, I cannot explain where the carriages will go. There is a section in the San Gottardo tunnel where the rock feels alive." In 1934, an Italian researcher, Professor Antonio Galani, began studying railway archives across Europe. He found strange coincidences. Reports of ghost trains in Hungary, Poland, and even Japan. Every account shared one common element: number 97, 3 carriages, and a locomotive moving as if by its own will, touching neither rails nor earth. One report described, "The train moved slowly, leaving no trace. Passengers did not respond to people on the platform." Galani noticed another pattern. All sightings occurred where old railways had once existed: abandoned tunnels, lines, closed decades prior. It seemed that train number 97 was not merely a means of transportation, but a living part of railway history itself, appearing where tracks had long vanished. Meanwhile, in Italy, rumors continued to grow. Villagers spoke of seeing the train in the mountains, passing above houses, and leaving a strange cold in its wake, accompanied by the metallic scent of machinery. Women reported seeing silhouettes in the carriage windows, motionless, like statues. In Giulio Rizzi's archive, a photograph had also survived. Taken accidentally during a railway inspection, it depicted the tunnel with a faint glow at its center, resembling a locomotive window. Yet on closer inspection, no tracks were visible beneath it. No one could explain how the light had appeared there. Rizzi attempted to connect these events to documents from the First World War. He speculated that the train's disappearance and subsequent appearances across the world could be related to experiments on military railway lines, but he found no proof. Even stranger, witnesses' accounts became more mystical over time. A German engineer studying Alpine railway tunnels in 1942 wrote in his journal, "A hum echoes through the tunnel, but no train is present. On the walls, lights reflect that cannot exist. Perhaps this is train number 97. In the post-war years, interest in the legend intensified. In the 1950s and 1960s, people reported strange sounds, vibrations in the rails, and soft lights appearing along night lines. No passengers, no driver, yet the presence was undeniable, compelling many to avoid certain sections of the tracks. Thus, a theory emerged, long whispered, never confirmed. Train number 97 was not an ordinary vehicle. It moved according to its own logic, appearing in places where rails no longer existed. Each report discovered by Rizzi and other researchers confirmed one idea. This train lived in a parallel line of history, intersecting reality. The conclusion of this chapter left more questions than answers. Empty tunnels, unsigned letters, glows, in the mountains, all intensified the sense of the unexplained. Train number 97 continued to exist in memory, in archives, in legends, and with every new witness account, its story grew more mystical, more ominous, as if the train still moved somewhere, between worlds, waiting for the moment to reappear in the San Gottardo tunnel and repeat its disappearance. Nearly 10 years had passed since the disappearance of train number 97, yet memories of it lingered. In small railway stations across Italy, Hungary, and Poland, elderly engineers gathered in the evenings after their shifts to quietly discuss the strange train. They referred to it as the ghost train, although the words ghost and legend failed to capture the full terror that remained after even a fleeting encounter. The first witness considered official was a shepherd named Luigi Bellini from Tuscany. He claimed that on the night of October 22, 1911, he saw a distant glow moving through the hills. At first he thought it was a wagon carrying lanterns, but as it drew closer, he realized it was a train. 3 carriages, illuminated with soft, golden light, gliding silently, with no sound of wheels or whistle, and no driver visible. It passed slowly, almost floating above the ground, and vanished into the mist without leaving a trace. News of this sighting spread quickly. Railway workers and villagers whispered about it, and soon similar accounts appeared throughout the country. In Venice, a night dispatcher noted in his logbook a train appearing on a disused track. In Florence, a factory worker reported seeing a faint light moving across a closed station platform. Each of these accounts shared one crucial detail: the number 97 visible somewhere on the locomotive or carriages. Carlo De Santi, the engineer who had first surveyed the San Gottardo tunnel, compiled maps and detailed measurements of the route. He marked all intermediate stations, side tunnels and ventilation shafts, calculating the train's speed and position at every moment. Yet the results were baffling. According to his calculations, train number 97 should have emerged from the tunnel 17 minutes after entering, but at the expected exit point there was nothing. More puzzlingly, the train disappeared around the 3rd kilometer, precisely where the rock became unusually dense and solid. De Santi wrote in his journal, "This is not an error. This is not a physical anomaly. It simply vanished into nothing." The 1920s, public interest in the train rekindled. Rumors of ghost trains operating on abandoned tracks circulated widely. An archival document discovered in Naples described a train, numbered 97, passing through a station that had been closed for 10 years. Witnesses described 3 carriages illuminated with soft golden light, no passengers visible. The locomotive moved silently. These reports were difficult to verify. Many railway records from the First World War had been lost or destroyed. Nevertheless, the stories persisted among railway workers, gaining detail with each retelling. An elderly man from Bologna, alive well into the 1950s, claimed he had personally witnessed train number 97. "I was working at the station on a foggy night. Suddenly, a light appeared in the hills. I heard 3 short whistles, then silence. When I checked the map, there were no tracks there." These accounts matched engineers' diaries. Fabio Conti, Giovanni Merli's assistant, wrote in 1910, "If something goes wrong and the rails disappear, I cannot explain where the carriages will go. There is a section in the San Gottardo tunnel where the rock feels alive." In 1934, Professor Antonio Galani began studying railway archives across Europe. He discovered strange coincidences, reports of ghost trains in Hungary, Poland, and even Japan. Each account contained one constant element: number 97, 3 carriages, and a locomotive moving as if by its own will, touching neither rails nor ground. One report described, "The train moved slowly, leaving no trace. Passengers did not respond to people on the platform." Galani noticed another pattern. All sightings occurred in locations where old railways had existed. Abandoned, tunnels, disused lines, tracks closed decades prior. Train number 97 seemed not merely a mode of transport, but a living fragment of railway history, appearing where the tracks had long vanished. Meanwhile, rumors continued to grow in Italy. Villagers claimed to see the train gliding across the mountains, passing above houses, leaving a strange chill and the metallic scent of machinery. Women reported seeing silhouettes in the windows, motionless like statues. In Giulio Rizzi's archive, a photograph survived, accidentally taken during a railway inspection. It showed a tunnel with a faint glow at its center, resembling a locomotive window. Upon closer inspection, there were no tracks beneath it. No one could explain how the light appeared. Rizzi attempted to link these events to First World War documents, speculating that the train's disappearance and subsequent appearances worldwide might relate to experiments on military railway lines. But he found no evidence. Stranger still, witness accounts became increasingly mystical. A German engineer studying Alpine tunnels in 1942 wrote, "A hum echoes through the tunnel, but no train is present. On the walls, lights reflect that cannot exist. Perhaps this is train number 97. In the post-war years, interest in the legend intensified. During the 1950s and 1960s, reports emerged of strange sounds, rail vibrations, and soft lights appearing along night lines. No passengers or driver were ever observed, yet the presence was undeniable, compelling many to avoid certain stretches of track. A theory began to emerge, long whispered but never confirmed. Train number 97 was not an ordinary vehicle, it moved, according to its own logic, appearing where rails no longer existed. Each report discovered by Rizzi and other researchers reinforced one idea. The train existed in a parallel line of history, intersecting reality itself. The conclusion of this chapter left more questions than answers. Empty tunnels, unsigned letters, glowing lights in the mountains, all intensified the sense of the unexplained. Train number 97 continued to exist in memory, in archives, and in legends. With each new witness account, its story grew more mystical, more ominous, as if the train still moved somewhere between worlds, waiting for the moment to reappear in the San Gotardo tunnel and repeat its disappearance. By the late 1930s, train number 97 had transcended the borders of folklore and rumor. What had once been whispered among railway workers and villagers had become a matter of quiet, scholarly interest. A small but dedicated group of investigators, historians, engineers and former railway employees began to piece together the scattered reports, determined to uncover the truth behind the train that seemingly defied all laws of physics and reason. Among them was Professor Antonio Galani, who had been studying European railway archives since 1934. He approached the matter with the meticulous rigor of a scientist, cross-referencing hundreds of documents, letters, and witness testimonies. Galani discovered an unsettling pattern. Wherever train number 97 was reported, the sightings occurred in locations previously abandoned or dismantled decades earlier. The train seemed to occupy a parallel layer of reality, moving along lines that no longer existed, indifferent to geography or time. Galani was joined by two engineers who had once worked on the construction of the San Gotardo tunnel, Carlo De Santi and Luigi Romano. De Santi's detailed maps of the original track were invaluable, documenting every meter, every ventilation shaft, and every curve of the tunnel. Romano, a former railway signal technician, contributed his own notes about mysterious anomalies, recorded during night shifts, unexplained vibrations, lights in tunnels with no trains, and signals triggered with no apparent cause. Together, the three began to build a comprehensive record, noting dates, locations, and witness testimonies. One of the most disturbing elements of their research was the consistency of the sightings. Eyewitnesses, separated by decades and continents, reported seeing the same train with 3 carriages and the number 97 displayed on the locomotive. The light within the carriages was always soft, golden, and the passengers, if glimpsed, were motionless, silent, staring outward as if trapped between worlds. In nearly every report, the train made no noise, left no marks, and in some cases seemed to hover slightly above the tracks, as if gravity had little effect on it. In 1939, Galani and his colleagues focused on Italy, retracing the route of the original 1911 journey. They interviewed surviving station masters, signal operators, and retired railway workers. Some remembered the night vividly. A retired signalman from Orta recalled, "I was certain the train would appear at the exit of the tunnel. I waited for it as I had waited hundreds of other times. But the tunnel was silent. Not a whistle, not a sound of wheels, nothing." The investigators found fragments of personal diaries, letters and newspapers describing similar events across Europe. Reports from Germany, Poland, Hungary, and even Japan. In nearly every case, the number 97 appeared. Galani hypothesized that the train was not bound by conventional space-time. its appearances governed by rules entirely unknown to human perception. RIDS's archives added another layer of mystery. Photographs from inspections in the 1920s and 1930s captured faint, ghostly lights in tunnels. In one particularly striking image, a tunnel appears almost empty, yet a soft glow at the center suggests the presence of a locomotive window, though no tracks can be seen beneath. Galani theorized that these lights were residual energy, echoes of the train's passage, captured inadvertently by the camera. The investigation grew more urgent as more contemporary reports surfaced. In 1942, during the height of World War II, a German engineer noted in his journal, "A hum echoes through the tunnel, but no train is present. On the walls, lights reflect that cannot exist. Perhaps this is train number 97. Galani and his team understood that conventional explanations, mechanical failure, misreporting, hallucination, could not account for the consistency, geographic spread, and chronological pattern of the sightings. They began to document not just the locations, but the atmospheric conditions, moon phases, and times of day, seeking patterns that might reveal how or why the train appeared. Their notebooks became dense with entries. Each line contained coordinates, dates, witness statements, and sketches of the train and its environment. They began noticing correlations. Sightings often occurred during foggy nights or in valleys where sound and light behaved unusually. Some entries even suggested that the train's movement might be influenced by geomagnetic anomalies. Despite the thoroughness of their work, fear and uncertainty pervaded every step. One evening, De Santi wrote in his personal journal, "We follow the traces, yet they elude us. The train is not lost. It chooses its path, appearing where it will and vanishing where it must. I cannot tell if we study it, or if it allows itself to be studied at all." The investigators also became aware of the psychological toll. Romano developed a recurring anxiety. He reported hearing distant whistles in his sleep, shadows of carriages moving across the walls of his room. Galani found himself obsessively calculating coordinates, connecting reports across decades, unable to rest until he had accounted for every known sighting. By 1943, the team had compiled a staggering array of data: maps, diagrams, photographs, and witness testimonies stretching across continents. Their findings suggested that train number 97 was not merely a missing train from 1911, but a phenomenon that existed independently of conventional laws, recurring at intervals, in locations old and abandoned, yet visible to human eyes. The most chilling conclusion was that the train seemed aware, its appearances selective, its path deliberate. Galani noted, "The train travels where it will, unbound by time or man. It exists in the intersections between our world and something else. We are mere observers and perhaps intruders." As the war raged around them, the investigators continued their work in secrecy. They knew that official authorities would dismiss their research as fanciful or impossible. Yet they were convinced that train number 97 was real, and that understanding it might reveal secrets about reality itself, secrets humanity was not yet ready to comprehend. By the end of Chapter 4, the train was no longer a mystery of missing tracks or vanished passengers. It had become a force beyond comprehension, a presence that challenged every assumption about space, time, and the permanence of the world around them. The investigators were left with a single, haunting certainty. Somewhere, in some forgotten tunnel or abandoned track, train number 97 continued its endless journey, indifferent to human observation, yet leaving traces that would persist for generations to come. By the early 1950s, train number 97 had entered legend, yet for the investigators it remained very real. Professor Galani, Carlo De Santi, and Luigi Romano, now older and wearier, continued to collect reports from across Europe. Each account, whether from a retired signalman in Italy, a port worker in Japan, or a farmer in Poland, spoke of the same train. 3 carriages, number 97, soft golden lights, and passengers who seemed frozen in time. In 1953, a particularly disturbing report reached them from the mountains of northern Italy. A railway inspector, Pietro Morelli, wrote that during a foggy night, while inspecting a disused branch line, he saw lights approaching along a track that had not been in operation for over 30 years. As the train came closer, he could make out 3 carriages, faint outlines of passengers, and the number 97 on the locomotive. But when he stepped closer to inspect, the train vanished before he could reach it, leaving only a faint smell of metal and oil. Galani and his team realized that the train's appearances were increasing in frequency. The events were no longer isolated. The train seemed to respond to attention, almost as if aware of those watching. Rumors spread that if one stood quietly near an old track, the train could be glimpsed, moving silently across impossible distances, ignoring barriers, weather, and time itself. In the autumn of 1955, De Santi received a letter postmarked from a small village near the Swiss border. The letter contained a crude sketch of a tunnel with a small golden glow at its center and 3 rectangles representing the carriages. The note read simply, "It returns. Tonight, look carefully." That night, De Santi, now in his late 60s, returned to the site of the original San Gottardo tunnel, accompanied by a young engineer he had been mentoring. The air was thick with mist, and the usual sounds of the valley seemed muted, as if nature itself held its breath. They waited for hours, scanning the darkened tunnel entrance with lanterns, hearts pounding. Then, without warning, a soft golden light appeared deep within the tunnel. At first it was a faint shimmer, barely distinguishable from the fog. Slowly, the glow intensified. The hum of metal moving on rails reached their ears, yet no vibrations were felt underfoot. 3 carriages emerged from the darkness, glowing softly, exactly as described in every report over the past 4 decades. De Santi's companion whispered, trembling, It's real." The train moved silently through the tunnel. Passengers, visible but motionless, staring outward with faces pale as marble. The locomotive bore the number 97, unmistakable. The golden light illuminated the walls, casting long shadows that seemed to reach toward the observers, almost alive. Time itself seemed suspended. Minutes, or perhaps hours, passed. The train glided toward the opposite end of the tunnel, disappearing into the darkness beyond, leaving behind only the faint scent of metal and oil and the profound awareness of something beyond comprehension. D. Santi recorded every detail in his journal. The glow, the carriages, the unblinking passengers, the absolute silence. He noted the eerie sensation that the train's passage had not just moved through space, but also brushed against the fabric of reality itself. In the following months, similar reports emerged. Witnesses in neighboring valleys described lights moving along abandoned tracks. Farmers reported shadows passing through misty fields. In one village, a retired station master claimed he heard the faint echo of 3 whistles, distinct and deliberate, exactly as the train had sounded in 1911. Galani, now growing frail, summarized his findings in a private note. Train number 97 does not belong to the world as we know it. It moves in a realm parallel to ours, intersecting with our perception only occasionally. It obeys no laws of physics, time, or geography. And yet, it is bound by its own logic, its own path, endless, unyielding, inevitable. The investigators agreed on one undeniable truth. The train had returned to the San Gotardo tunnel, completing a cycle that had begun over 40 years earlier, and yet they feared that its journey was far from over. They realized that while it could be observed, it could never be controlled. Train number 97 existed independently, a living enigma, immune to human intervention, yet leaving traces for those perceptive enough to witness them. In 1960, De Santi wrote a final entry in his personal log. "I have seen it with my own eyes. The train moves where it wills. It is neither alive nor dead, neither past nor future. It is a force, silent, patient, and eternal. Perhaps one day it will return to us through the same tunnel, and we will be ready. Or perhaps we will never be ready." The story of train number 97, which began as a simple disappearance, had evolved into a tale that defied understanding. It became legend, myth, and perhaps the closest humanity could come to encountering something truly beyond the natural order. The train continued its endless journey, crossing mountains, valleys, and centuries, leaving behind whispers, shadows, and the unmistakable golden glow of 3 carriages moving silently toward eternity. And somewhere, deep within the mountains, the San Gotardo tunnel waited, silent, empty, watching,